You're listening to The Sister Trill with Danae and Kiveli.
Hi everybody and welcome back to The Sister Trill. I'm Kiveli.
And I'm Danae.
And in today's episode, we are going to actually talk about something that just came up in our lives quite naturally this week and kind of triggered this conversation. I think it's about a topic that we have thought about a lot, whether we wanted to or not, simply from a biographical standpoint, which is anxiety. Specifically for us, of course, performance anxiety, but we came to the topic this week because we were actually talking about social anxiety and like the type of normal anxious feelings that many young people feel anyway, and I would say more young people feel now than maybe 50 years ago. So before we get into this topic, let's first share what we disagreed on this week. I don't know if you've prepared something.
I've prepared something.
Oh wow, yeah. Okay, go.
So it's actually a disagreement that's a bit further back, so it's not strictly speaking this week, but I just wanted to bring it in here because this morning I woke up and my son wanted to have some porridge, so I made some porridge for him, and I just, without really looking, just grabbed some oats. And in this house we have fine oats and we have, what do you call the other ones? Like big oats. And
yummy oats. You have fine oats and we have yummy oats.
Got it.
That's
and
what you
I
call
just
them.
grabbed one thinking they were the fine oats, but they weren't. And basically we just realized that my son and I, actually he likes both, but I particularly like the fine oats. Mm-hmm. And I really wanted to be like a real, almost like yogurty texture.
I know exactly what you mean.
Whereas you like the big
the
oats.
Texture, the actual
that you can actually like bite
three-dimensional feeling.
Yeah, and for me it's the exact opposite. So that's a very severe disagreement that we had.
The only thing I can think of right now, which I'm not sure if we've even talked about in a previous episode, I think that we sometimes talked something about water glasses, right? Our water glasses.
Oh, yeah.
But the one that I would like to bring back to the forefront is the fact that so many times I have a glass that I use and then I lay it down on the kitchen counter and literally I come back 10 minutes later and it's in the dishwasher. And I was like,
by the way,
gonna use it again.
Today, I was missing some glasses and I just went down to your room and found 3 and just heroically brought those up because Kiveli was not here today and placed them in the dishwasher. But yeah, that glass story is always happening. For me, it's such a feeling of satisfaction when I open that cupboard and see that all the glasses are there.
No, I get it. Yeah. I get it. This part I can relate to, absolutely.
Yeah.
But the only thing is that, if I know I'm going to be using that glass again and then I come back and usually it's also, I've put like cold water in, which I love, and then I have to.
And I've just chucked it. Sorry, yeah. Also, I just want to say that today we're kind of doing a premiere because we're puzzling while we are recording the podcast. So let's see how that's going to work out for us.
I've come back from like a day trip visiting my teacher, actually, in a different city. And and kind of like we're in a very chill mode right now.
And we have this 1,000 piece planet puzzle that we're puzzling together.
So we're currently, if we appear distracted, it's because we are.
Because we are. Yeah.
Okay, so let's get into the topic of anxiety or performance anxiety, social anxiety. Let's maybe approach it first from, I would say, our personal experience with it. I would say that from my side, I have felt both. I felt, of course, performance anxiety quite strongly, for sure. I mean, growing up and handling that. But maybe what many people might not expect from a person as extroverted as I am, I have also felt and dealt with social anxiety or social insecurity, or I've been, very aware of my lack of satisfaction of my social perception, I would say. Mm-hmm. How have you felt growing up in both those fields?
Of course, as an artist, I think it's kind of inevitable that you go through a phase of performance anxiety through a phase of, as we call it, nerves, where you feel intimidated by the idea of going on stage. Usually you start out quite natural because you're very young. You don't even overthink it. And then suddenly there comes a point where you're hit by the whole...
The monster.
Yeah, by this whole situation that is kind of extreme, that we put ourselves in on a regular basis. And of course, I've gone through that phase. And I really, truly think that every artist has gone through that phase. I think it's a phase that you grow with, and a phase that is really important and vital in our development. And when it comes to social anxiety, I don't think I've ever experienced severe social anxiety. Of course, I've felt uncomfortable in certain scenarios. And also, as we've discussed in a previous episode, I am more introverted than you are. And there are scenarios where I just feel uncomfortable when there are many people around after a certain time. Usually not in the beginning, but when a certain amount of time has passed, I just feel like, okay, it's enough. I want to get out. My energy is drained. I want to get out. It's not so much anxiety, but it's a feeling of discomfort.
Yeah. No, what I think would be interesting to maybe start with the social anxiety part, because there is already a YouTube clip where we speak a bit about performance anxiety, and we can definitely maybe refer to that as well. But the social anxiety we've actually never spoken about in public, and I think the reason why it kind of came up for me now was that a friend of mine was telling me about the fact that he's close to someone who's currently feeling like there is some social anxiety going on, and I started realizing that social anxiety is something so fluid, and like between the whatever diagnosis of like an actual being socially anxious as a psychological thing to be worked on versus just phases where one feels less comfortable or less confident. There is a huge spectrum, and I would argue that many people, especially nowadays where we live in a time where psychological diagnoses just seem to be welcomed right and left, and everyone has something they're clinically diagnosed with in a way. I would say that we've kind of lost touch with the fact that certain experiences are just extremely normal and human, and just phases that happen. And even someone who I would say now would be perceived as socially extremely comfortable, like you and I, especially, I mean, so many people come up to me and say, oh, you feel, you're not at all self-conscious ever, or, like people have said like, oh, you it's so hard, you never get ashamed, or you never get, self-conscious about something, for me to absolutely acknowledge that I definitely in the past have felt socially anxious, and still sometimes, get uncomfortable when triggered by certain situations. For example, the more I want to impress somebody, or the more I want to leave a certain type of impression within a group or in a certain scenario, the less easy for me it is to tap into my natural personality when I become self-conscious. And in the past, the way it manifested itself for me was that I was always, as you were as well, the youngest person in the group, and a very like quite obviously less experienced, potentially less knowledgeable, less mature person, because I was sometimes up to like 10 years younger than the average age of the people around me, because of the fact that we were always surrounded by our musical class, not necessarily our school class. And I remember very, very strongly between the ages of, I would say, maybe 12 and 17, feeling that no one understood me the way I want to be understood.
Well, I think I have many things to say about that. I think what you're talking about, or where you're coming from right now, also has a lot to do with this other situation that we've discussed, which is our sibling situation. Because I was never the youngest person in the group because you were always younger than me. So that is, I think, something that is very particular to your situation, especially if you're talking about the ages between 12 and 17, because, you know, I was hanging out. Yes, people were slightly older than me, but not so much older than me, maybe 3 or 4 years older, which is different, you know, compared to 8 or 10 years older. So I think that's not necessarily something that I relate to on that level. I can see it through your eyes, of course, but that was not my experience. And the second thing I wanted to say is that I think that you can definitely compare this social anxiety that everyone kind of goes through, especially during puberty and all of that, to the phase that we go through as artists. It's like a coming of age thing. And it's just, you know, a little bit also the fear of the unknown, the fear of, you know, something that you have to still or have yet learned to navigate.
Yes.
And you just have to learn how to act in certain situations. And with that, hand in hand, also come embarrassing situations, uncomfortable situations where you act in ways where later you think, oh my God, why did I do that? So I think it is normal, and the hardest thing is in that moment to realize and accept that it is part of the process. That this is not the end of the world right now, but that it is part of the process if it is within the realm of, you know, normal social anxiety, not actually debilitating diagnosis of, you know, something worse.
So one of the things that I remember actively changing when I, like, you know, kind of shifted from this like more feeling like I was misunderstood phase to finally feeling comfortable and coming into my own, I remember like becoming very honest and aware about my coping mechanisms. Like, I know that most people usually, I would say, the more socially anxious they are, the less they say, or like the more they retract into themselves. For me, it was the opposite. The more socially anxious or uncomfortable I felt, the more attention I tried to get. Like, the louder I'd be, the more, maybe you remember.
It rings a bell.
Like, the louder I'd be, the more... you know, I'd try to make a point in a conversation, which, I mean, for other people might be totally unrelatable, because most people are like, okay, I'm just going to sit here silently and hope no one notices me. But the trigger was exactly the same. I mean, I was feeling the exact same symptoms of, you know, like insecurity. I was just dealing with it differently. So I became very aware of like separating what was I saying out of like the need for attention, which for other people might be, you know, the trying to avoid attention, you know, and then what was I saying because I actually had something to say. And I tried to challenge myself. I remember in some social interactions, after I started thinking about this, to be actively silent, which was the opposite of my usual behavior. So in the opposite would be for someone to be actively not silent, to be actively saying something.
I mean, I think I'm probably more on the other side. If I get insecure or anxious, or, you know, in the past when I did in these situations, I would just, you know, be on the side of being shy or retracted or just, you know, more quiet. And I think it's important to realize that some people, as you just said, that are, you know, loud and maybe a bit outrageous, might also be acting like that out of that motivation, and not because they're crazy and are crazy for attention. But actually because they're insecure. And it's good to know that when you're navigating a conversation, especially if you're the person maybe that is not so anxious, you know, to help and facilitate the flow.
And I think it's a very good point that you make, because I think many people that feel social anxiety that are on the shyer side believe that, you know, the louder, more extroverted people are maybe like, you know, just totally have it figured out, if you will. And I think that the assumption that certain people just, you know, don't struggle from insecurity is a very wrong assumption, and usually an assumption that leads to, you know, less smaller feelings of self-worth within somebody. I think, you know, I think the kind of like taking power away from the group. Like, if you go and you think, oh my God, everyone is thinking this about me, or everyone is laughing about me. No, usually all these people are just as, you know, kind of tuned into their own feedback loops of, you know, like insecurities. They're all dealing with themselves trying to feel secure. They're definitely not dealing with, you know, paying attention to you.
And I think it's also important to remember that probably, 99% of the people on this earth have insecurities. Probably 100%.
Yeah.
100% of the people on this earth have insecurities, and in a conversation, certain insecurities will always come up for every single person. And the people that appear more confident, or probably also the people that feel more confident and exude more confidence, are simply the people that have learned to handle these situations. So it's not about, they were born without anxiety, and it's the same when we're talking about performance anxiety. No one is born without a certain type of, respect and fear of going on stage and performing for thousands of people, but certain people have mastered the art of handling this situation. And it's the same with the performance anxiety. People have learned with social anxiety, people have learned how to handle it. And I think that, for me at least, when I had this realization at a certain age, that took so much weight off my shoulders.
Yes.
Because I really felt like, okay, I don't have to make it go away. It will never go away, and that's okay. I just have to find my method of dealing with it.
And that's exactly also what I always think about the fact when people say, well, yes, but I'm afraid of this or this or that. I think that there is often this misconception which tunes into what you said, that being confident or appearing confident means that you are not afraid, that you do something that suddenly you feel an absence of fear, or it doesn't even have to be fear, an absence of doubt. But the truth is that you do something in spite of your fear, which means that on top of the fear, what you add is courage.
Yeah.
And that is the way that you actually then start dealing with your social anxiety. I think in the beginning, you don't need to minimize your fear. You need to maximize your courage. And by consistently engaging in this, okay, I feel this amount of fear, I'm going to be even more courageous, through repetition and, feelings of, progress and mini success moments and stories, the fear starts to go away, or to feel less overwhelming and become more manageable. And even whether it is performance anxiety or social anxiety, doesn't mean that it will go away forever. Sometimes it might come up either unexpectedly or triggered by something. And this type of setback doesn't mean that suddenly, all your breadth of experience is gone. You can still depend on it. You can remember, okay, that's fine. Today I had a day off, or something happened that triggered my anxiety, and tomorrow I go back to my, I have to maybe bring more courage with me then, because, to kind of counteract that moment.
Yeah. And I think I want to add to this. I totally agree, but it's not just courage. I think you should also bring a plan.
Oh, yeah.
Because when it comes to performance anxiety, the best antidote to being nervous is just be prepared. Be so perfectly prepared that nothing can rattle you. Know your piece inside out, be able to play it backwards. Then you're going to have a whole other feeling of confidence than if you're just, halfway prepared. And it's the same thing when it comes to any type of anxiety. I would say, know your fear. Know what it is that you're afraid of. Understand it. I've told you this story many times, but I watched this movie about this tightrope artist. Oh, yeah. This French tightrope walker whose name is Petit. I think his last name is Petit.
Le Petit.
I don't remember his first name. But anyway, his last name is Petit. And he did this crazy thing where he put his tightrope between the two World Trade Centers. It's a true story. And he walked this tightrope without any security. And he walked it, I think, 8 times back and forth. And of course, he became very famous because of this. And well, first he was arrested, and then he became very famous. And people asked him, how can you not be afraid? And he said, I am afraid. Of course I am afraid. But I know my fear. I know exactly what I'm doing. I know exactly where to put my foot. I know exactly what to do. And I can handle it. I know that I can handle it. He said, if I were not afraid, I would fall. But because he's afraid and has a plan how to deal with that fear, which for him really his life depends on it, he can handle it. And that was very interesting to me. And once he said, for example, if I'm afraid of a spider, what am I going to do? I'm going to look up the spider. I'm going to read up on the spider. I'm going to learn what the spider reacts to, how it moves, how high is its speed, what does it eat, is it dangerous, all of that. And then I will become less and less afraid. And I think it's also interesting that we have this saying, face your fears. But face your fears doesn't mean, don't be prepared and just face them, because that's going to scare the hell out of you. But really be prepared, study your fears, and then with the plan and the courage, face them.
Yes, I completely agree with you. And I would say, to keep it applicable for the social side, I think it's totally respectable and necessary to sometimes go into an engagement or a situation or a conversation having planned out what you want to say, what you want to get across, I remember that, in the times, I mean, it's a bit of a ridiculous example, but it's kind of the same thing, just on an extremely, I would say, kind of also more relatable front, that, when I was in school and I knew that a boy I thought was very cute, was having his classes next to my classroom,
Right,
I don't know, every time on Thursdays or something like that. And I knew that obviously that made me very shaky on my legs and I don't know, insecure or something like that.
Shaky on your legs.
Well, you know what I mean? that I remember I would always plan where I would be, what I would do, because, and I think, many girls do that. It's not like something that
yeah,
is
but I mean,
specific to me.
until today, I mean, we sometimes discuss conversations, uncomfortable conversations that we plan out. I mean, not with each other, but that we will have with someone else, and we literally rehearse them together.
Of course. I mean, to in a more professional way, if you have an important interview, or you have like an important meeting with someone where you want to pitch something, of course you're going to rehearse it, because you know that you're going to be more nervous. It's, more, you feel like more is at stake. Therefore, you're prone to maybe, get into a more self-conscious mindset. You're going to rehearse it. So I don't think that there is anything wrong with applying that, especially when you're young and you're starting to, grow into your personality and your identity, to rehearse the things that maybe later when you're 30 years old come naturally to you. And I think that that's this mindset, this having a plan just needs to be normal.
Exactly.
And I think that in that sense, maybe, parents can engage with that in that with their. I don't know how you're planning on doing it with your children, because of course it's true that nowadays there is so much more at stake in your everyday life because of social media, because everything is kind of up forever. Like, no mistake can be forgiven, in a way.
It's interesting that you brought up this no mistake can be forgiven, because I wanted to just say that I have one more piece of advice that just came to my mind, which is that let's say that you are in this situation, and let's say that let's say if you're giving a speech, you're so shaky, your hands are shaking, I don't know, your voice is shaky, like it's apparent, or let's say you're on stage and you made a mistake, or, something happened. I think the way to go then is to be disarmingly honest.
Yes.
I think that also takes away a lot of pressure if you just lead with, hey, I'm really nervous right now. And then everyone laughs.
Absolutely. Yes. I mean, honesty is so disarming. Always.
And I think that also is a good piece of advice, to instead of trying to cover it up and, pretending like nothing is wrong when it's really obvious that everything is wrong. Just say, I'm really honest. And then people will laugh. I'm really nervous. And people will laugh and be like, okay, and then you kind of got it off your chest. And usually things flow better from that point onward. And even if you're having this uncomfortable conversation or something with somebody else, just in a private way, maybe even lead with, okay, this is making me a bit nervous. Sorry if I'm going to be talking very fast. I just want to get it off my chest. Something like that.
Yes.
Can also be helpful.
Yes.
So, when you said with my kids, I think I will definitely try to tell them that no mistake is unforgivable, as you said.
Not unforgivable.
No, I know, because this is how we feel, but I want to try to tell them that it is not the case, and that especially in times of social media, yes, everyone will see it and things like that. But tomorrow they will be talking about the next thing.
I see. Yeah.
You know, it's not forever. And it was the same back in the day, even without social media. If someone did something embarrassing, the whole school kind of talked about it for a day or two, and then the next embarrassing thing happened. And I think I want to try to instill in them, of course, as much, you know, confidence and self-love as I can. I think this is the root of everything, and this is the cure for a lot of things. So I think if someone really just feels okay with who they are, totally independent from who they are, just feeling at peace and like balanced, I think this is a very good place to start with all of these
and
things.
I think that it's also, I mean, this is just a spontaneous thought, to be honest, but I was just thinking right now that it is very valuable for yourself to become aware of where do you draw your own confidence from. Is it, for example, your intellect? Is it your charm? Is it your compassion? Is it your ability to, your looks, of course, is your ability to, you know, create a good time and spread a good mood, you know, and it's, I think, totally fine to know where that is and then, you know, draw confidence from it. And of course, I mean, the more you feel like, the more you achieve in your life, or you feel like you've achieved in your life, the more fundamentally confident you'll be, and the less dependent you'll feel from, you know, other people's opinions or other people's approval, which of course is something that, of course, shouldn't be a factor in your confidence anyway. But, you know, if we're honest, of course, it always is, you know, kind of also.
Yeah, no, but I think it's a very good point to just focus on your strengths.
Exactly.
And this can be part of your plan.
Yeah. And I think that, you know, there are so many things that you can draw confidence from that maybe aren't immediately the qualities that one thinks of. I think most people think of, I would say, charm or okay, looks, of course, is a kind of a double-edged sword one, you know, I would say. But and many people think, of course, intelligence. But I would also say, for example, being really knowledgeable about one topic. You know, like this being your niche topic where you're an expert on, and to know that, you know what, in this topic, it's very likely I know more than the person I'm talking to, and therefore I can feel comfortable in this conversation. Or, for example, another one that I feel is completely overlooked, but is a super valuable quality and trait that you can take confidence from because people do want it, is kindness.
Of course.
I think that someone who is really able to be kind and patient and understanding in the conversation is so valuable, and people gravitate to that so much. And it's maybe not the thing that naturally people think like, oh, I'm so compassionate, you know, people are going to like me because of it. But I think that the same way, another thing that, for example,
maybe
always...
the way to find this trait in you, you know, like you say, even the not so obvious one, like kindness, is to just maybe first think about, who am I? You know, not who am I trying to be to please someone or to appear cool or to appear confident, but who am I naturally as a person? And then that's also, you know, where the self-love and the self-confidence comes from. And then use that as your strength. So as you said, if you're a naturally kind person, then just, you know, put that to the forefront. There are people that are not naturally kind.
Absolutely. I know.
So and I think that plays a role as well. To know yourself. You know, first you have to do the work yourself, find out who you are, and then you can think about how to use that in a conversation or in a social setting.
And I think, by the way, what I was saying before, being an expert at one topic is, you know, everyone knows more about one thing than the other, right? And I mean, sometimes just, you know, steering the conversation to I don't know, a series you know a lot about, or you know, a topic you know a lot about, or a style of music you know a lot about, can just be okay. You can take some security from that conversation, computer games or whatever, you know, like
Actually, I was just recently in a little bit social anxiety inducing setting, because I had a concert in France, and after that there was a dinner, and there was a dinner with exclusively French speaking people. So English was off the table and I had to speak in French, and I understand French very well, but speaking just takes a lot of concentration for me, and I really have to focus. I'm just slower in reacting, and I am definitely not my usual, let's say, in a non-arrogant way, my usual charming, witty self in French, compared to English or German or Greek. And I had 2 dinners. The first dinner, I was really pretty silent. And then the second dinner, I just, as you said, went into it with 100% courage. I maximized my courage.
Yeah.
And yes, I kind of also had thought of 2-3 topics, that I was prepared to talk about. And it was totally fine. I mean, it was kind of like...
daunting.
Yeah, and also exhausting. If you're focusing so much on the language for like 3 hours. When it was over, I was like, wow, okay. But it was fun. I actually enjoyed it. And I actually thought, I want more of that in order to become really, really fluent, in, I don't know, some months or something like that.
Yeah. And it's exactly, I think it's just this fundamental shift of perspective where you understand that the problem is not the fact that you are anxious about something. That is natural. That is kind of the default state of the human. The chance is to develop more courage than that exactly that you feel. And another thought that always helped me, whether it is performance or social anxiety, was the fact that to understand where does this mechanism come from inside of us. And anxiety as a mechanism or worrying is something that is deeply rooted in our evolutionary survival. We used to, I've told you this story many times, like we'd sit around the fire and we'd hear the bushes rattling and we'd hide every time. Now, 99% of the times, the bush rattling was just the wind. But 1% of the time, it was the scary mountain lion that could come and eat you. Yeah. So we hid every time just for this 1% where the mountain lion came. So we reacted as, fearful as possible every time. Yeah. So it's kind of, it's so natural. Deeply rooted in us that believing that there is something wrong with us for feeling anxiety is completely false.
Also, bouncing off of that, also, for example, the fact that we have cold hands or, sweaty palms, cold hands when we feel anxious is exactly the same evolutionary origin. It's because when we feel that danger is approaching, it usually meant there was a big bear or an animal that could attack you or, bite you. And our body automatically brings the blood flow to the middle of the body, to the vital part, so to the organs, and away from the extremities, so that if, let's say, your finger is bitten off, there's not as much blood there. That's why it also feels cold. And also your actually important organs are functioning. So this is also just the very simple reason why we have cold hands. So it's nothing that we need to feel, oh no, I have cold hands again.
Like what's wrong with me?
What's wrong with me? I'm so nervous. No, your body is doing what it's supposed to be doing. It's just in our situation, it doesn't serve us. But it's fine. It's fine. You can accept that. It's fine. It just means that your body's working. And now you have your method to deal with it. If cold hands are actually an issue, like for pianists, it's actually a bit of a problem. Then you can, have something warm with you. Like you and I, we've had like warm pads for so many years when we started out playing. And of course now, in my case, 25 years later.
Do you still get cold hands?
I don't get cold hands anymore because I just
stop.
Because we've retrained our brain. That's why I'm saying 25 years later, or maybe also when did that start that I didn't have cold hands anymore? Maybe 20 years later. I realized, okay, when I feel this danger, it's not because an animal is going to come and eat me, but because I'm nervous and about to go on stage, and I've just reprogrammed, let's say, my brain.
Because I also don't get cold hands anymore.
But
some
it takes a long time.
And also, there are some professional musicians for whom that symptom always remains. Like I have other symptoms that remain. It's just that the cold hand one kind of doesn't.
Has subsided. For me as well.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
But I do think it's a retraining why it has subsided. It didn't just go
and I
away.
think that also whenever it comes to these, psychologically induced feelings, you have to be aware that you're dealing with your subconscious. Like you're confronted with parts of yourself that you don't have that easy access to, which is why they feel so overpowering, and which is why you feel so powerless against them. And I think that you have to be aware that there is some, I would say, mind gymnastics also maybe needed in order to kind of, through conscious acts, retrain your subconscious, like, just because that the fact that cold hands is that the cold hands used to be a survival mechanism doesn't mean that suddenly, okay, now that I know it, the cold hands are gone. I mean,
it's just
until
the first step.
until that reaches your subconscious and the cold hands go away, it needs tons of repetition and tons of exposure to that situation.
Yes.
And I think that there are other things, for example, that you can do, and I would like to put specifically 2 strategies forward that I found very helpful when it comes to anything that induces anxiety, or especially anything that induces self-consciousness. I mean, not fear of spiders or something like that, but like anything that has to do with you then being in your head.
Yeah.
The first thing is posture. And posture and breathing. Basically, I mean, your body does certain things automatically when it feels anxious. Irregular breath, shallow breathing, you kind of retracting into yourself, maybe putting your head down. And although in that moment when you put your head up and start breathing deeply, it's not like, okay, you do that and the anxiety is away. But there is this kind of way of tricking your body into a more confident stance that has the potential to then, find a connection to your also more confident psychological stance.
Absolutely. I just want to quickly put in a study here where there was, in the study, the brain activity was measured, and they could measure how much, happiness or fear or sadness or something like that people were feeling at that time. And they had, so people were sitting there and they were telling them, sad thoughts, think of the saddest moment in your life, think of the happiest moment in your life, all of that. And then, so they measured the brain activity, and then a couple of days later, they took the exact same people, made them think about the exact same things, only they had a machine in place that kind of lifted their mouth to a smile. So that was like kind of pulling on their cheeks, if you will, to have them in a constant like happy face, like forced happy face.
Yeah.
And they were thinking the exact same things, and they were significantly happier. So I just want to say that what you said is definitely scientifically true.
Yes.
That if we actually assume the body posture or the facial expression that exudes happiness or confidence, something in us does switch. Of course, not everything, but it is a first step. Fake it till you make it.
Yes,
definitely.
Yes. So this is exactly the first practical point, and then the other one. And it's, I would say, for me, harder to explain or to put into words, but it is the thing that I knew instinctively that as I was dealing with my performance anxiety, that was what I was doing. But then years later, I watched a lecture by a psychiatrist who described that. And I was like, oh my God, yeah, that is exactly what I'm doing. And it was like kind of put into a more accessible version of it, which basically says that what happens when you are self-conscious is you put an exorbitant amount of attention on yourself. So basically you think, how do I look? What do I say? What do I do? Oh my God, there is a silence right now, or the difficult part is coming up. I'm challenged right now. Oh my God, everyone's noticing. So if you were going to tell this person, relax, or, stop thinking that, what do? You continue thinking about that. Like literally, if the thought that you're thinking is, don't be afraid or don't think about that, all you can do is think about that. So you have to do kind of the opposite. Instead of trying to take away attention from yourself, what you have to do is push your attention with as much concentration as you can outward. So the way that you remember that when I was describing to you what helps me on stage to when I'm feeling nerves coming up or anxiety coming up, I would say is I try to listen to myself as if I'm, the audience, or I try to take more, try to take more influence into the phrase I'm playing. So for example, I actively decide to play a phrase.
Do you have like an outer perspective? Like, do you see yourself?
No,
visually?
it's more of hearing, more than hearing than visual. I don't visualize myself, but it's more like, I try to be even more focused on the music. I try to be as
No,
musical as
same.
I
This I
the same
totally
thing,
get. Yeah,
as
yeah.
musical as and we kind of always framed it into, we remember that the music is what we do it for. We let the music be the thing that takes us out of the anxiety.
Well, I
again.
sometimes even go a step further, and just to prove to myself that I'm in control,
Yeah.
like take a freedom that I wouldn't take.
Yes,
Like
I
that's
totally-
not part of my interpretation.
Yeah.
But just to show, okay, this is me
Deciding something.
deciding
Yeah,
something.
yeah.
Who's pulling the strings here, and I'm not, controlled by the force of my nerves.
Yeah. So, but ultimately, what we are doing is we are trying to, if we have, 50% of attention in our own mind about all the things that could go wrong, we try to then put at least 60 or 70% of our attention on the music, so that of course the nerves are still there, the negative thoughts are still somewhere there, but we're trying to constantly overpower them with attention on something else, attention on something that is important to us, the music, attention on something that is out of our mind.
Yeah.
So if you translate that into a social situation or a conversation or an interaction where it's, where you're within a group, is the more you catch yourself being self-conscious and having, a string of undesirable thoughts in your mind, start looking at the people around you, start looking at face expressions, start looking into the faces of the people, start paying attention to what they're doing, and not as a group, but as individuals, like this person is smiling, this person is looking bored, this person is, start really trying to, let different thoughts and observations enter your mind. And if you're within for example, really high pressure debate, obviously it's like pay even more attention to what the other person is saying.
Yeah.
And that's, that's how you're going to get out of this spiral. Like basically all you have to do is get out of the spiral of your own thoughts by overpowering it with something else. Now the something else can be a game plan. The something else can be, the intense observation of other people. The something else can be tapping into the thing that makes you feel confident, the topic that makes you feel confident. It can be the posture. You just need to do something that makes your mind take their attention away from that negative feedback loop
And
that's going on
focus
inside
on what's
your mind.
actually at hand.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that is, of course, much harder the more, actual pressure and, the more actual stakes there are. So obviously in a performance setting or in a setting where you have an audience or, something that is very important to you, the amount of, negative thoughts and doubts that could enter your mind is that much bigger. Therefore, the amount that you have to counteract it with is that much more, has to be that much more powerful and worked on so much more. So, you need more preparation, you need a bigger why are you doing it and all these things.
Yeah.
So, but yeah.
I feel like this episode we just exclusively agreed with each other.
It's true.
It's really, this is a subject I think that we both just see with the exact same eyes.
Yes.
I hope it wasn't boring, but no, I think it was.
Because I think we both went...
I think every other subject we have, somewhat differing views.
Yes, that's true.
But here we're just totally aligned.
Yes.
But I can't wait for the stories. 'Cause
what are you going to do?
Because I have a social anxiety story that I want to tell.
Danae?
I mean, I can tell it and you can still cut it out if it's not appropriate.
I think I know which one you're going to say. The fact that you're that
The way that I'm looking at you.
amused and excited to share it, I feel like I know exactly what you're going to say. And in the spirit of, owning, I think I'm going to let you say it. And I don't know what story I'm going to say, but
So shall I get into it?
I know exactly what you're going to say.
Okay,
Please
so,
get into it.
So this is a very personal story of my little sister.
Oh boy.
And this is a story of one of her first sexual encounters, where she was with a boy, and it was unclear whether something was going to happen or not going to happen, and she was very socially anxious, and it just has become this running joke between us, which is why it's also so present in my mind, because whenever we talk about a situation that's uncomfortable, we reference that situation. And basically what happened was, she asked the guy if he had a condom, and he said yes. And that was the end of the conversation. Also the end of the action, I want to say. It was and we always say, do you have a condom? Okay, great, thank you.
No,
good
because
to know.
I literally said, because basically what was going through my mind in that moment is, we were like fooling around and we were doing things, but it was, and it was the first time we'd done something. And in my mind, like I remember it was clear to me somehow that I didn't want to have sex with him there.
Okay.
But for some reason that I can't really tell you why, I also kind of wanted to like create a scenario. I don't know, like in my mind, here's what was happening. In my mind, I was thinking, okay, what happens in these situations, like the way I had played it out in my head or in movie scenes is, people make out on a bed and then at some point the question comes, do you have a condom?
Yeah.
And then the person says,
were you
yes,
a virgin
and then,
at that
no,
point?
I wasn't.
Okay.
And do you have a condom? And then the guy says, yes or no. And if he says yes, it's okay. And then that's the introduction to the more sexual, to the sex, right? Yeah. But in that moment, like I had made simultaneously I'd made the decision that I didn't want to have sex, and like my kind of
let's just say you were acting without a plan.
My subconscious, okay, what am I supposed to say now, was also working the same time. So what I ended up saying was, do you have a condom? And the guy said yes, and I said, I don't want one.
I don't want one. Exactly.
And then he looked at me weirdly. And then I like explained that, maybe it wasn't a good idea to have
sex. You basically weren't even interested in that information.
No. And it was like, do you have a condom? Yes.
Basically.
Okay, don't want one. And he was like, what?
It's much funnier how we use it now, because whenever either I come to Kiveli or the other way around, and we talk about an upcoming uncomfortable scenario, one says to the other, okay, but don't go asking for condoms. So it has really become a thing for us.
Yeah.
I think it's a very fitting story.
It's a very fitting story. Yeah. My story. I mean, I have one story that is even more personal.
Okay.
Which I'm not sure if you want to...
Well, I mean, you can say it. We can still edit it out.
Okay. Which I find interesting, but I would say it also plays into your coping mechanism of trying to, keep things as private as possible. And I would say that I found it very interesting that when you had sex with your boyfriend for the first time, you didn't tell him that you were a virgin, and you kept that information to yourself and told him later that was your first time.
Literally,
and that was
much later.
Much later.
When he was already my ex-boyfriend.
Yeah. And that you, I don't know whether it was a way for you to deal with your anxiety of the moment, but that you
I think it was much bigger than the anxiety of the moment.
Okay.
It was the anxiety of not being enough, of not being experienced enough.
But it has to do with insecurity, and therefore some type of But
I mean, it was a much bigger insecurity than just the insecurity of that moment. It was the underlying insecurity of my life, of not being enough, of not being experienced enough. So like having to pretend that I'm more experienced than I actually am. That's where it came from. And it just, translated into me pretending that I was not a virgin when I actually was.
Yeah, which is interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty extreme, I would say.
But, I mean, it was still, as far as I can, I mean, I wasn't there. As far as I was told by you, very nice. And, you were in love with him and he was in love with you.
No, it was perfect. It was totally perfect. And it was actually even cuter when then we talked about it and I told him the story and he was happy, He was happy and, it felt good to share that in hindsight.
Yeah. So I think that was two very private stories in the end.
Private stories out there in the world.
Loving it. Yeah. And I think I would also really just, like to take the chance to quite, officially put out there that as two people, you and me, that I think are very often perceived as, super confident and the opposite of socially anxious, to, tap into the fact that, of course, we've also had a fair share of, conscious engagement with this topic. And we're absolutely not exempt from
And also
moments
today.
of real,
Yeah.
still,
Yeah.
I mean, both in the past and still today,
Yeah.
moments of real and recurring insecurity, whether it is from the side of performing or also really in everyday interactions that just, trigger a side of you that is just less naturally confident, and that it's totally okay and nothing to feel inadequate about.
Yeah, absolutely. It's okay to be anxious.
Absolutely. Yes, it is. Okay, then this concludes today's episode. Sending lots of love to you all and see you next week. Bye.
Bye.
You're listening to The Sister Drill with Danae and Kiveli.